Where do you want me? Well, I'm going to be over here on the side. If you're doing most of the talking, you should be in the middle. But I'll lead you through everything that we're doing. And we're live right now, but they're not on yet. So like that's crooked. I thought you were going to a different t-shirt.
So
I did.
If somebody is,
Well, I tried that.
Those are Lynn's numbers for now. She's running it again.
Wow.
That's the mean, or you got mean and median here. The same. Okay. Hey, what was the last year's from last year? That's an ungodly amount of fish.
nice. Buddy.
You got a smudge in the lens. Should we lower this a bit? It's more us in the center of the frame.
So if people are watching on the streaming on YouTube, can they see you?
They can see everything. They just won't be able to see the clip.
385.
Yeah, but right
Oh.
now, I mean,
Yes, they can see us right now.
even though there's no classrooms on, there
Even
could
though
be
there's-
a
wow.
public show out there.
We're live and they're watching us. Wait.
You
Hello,
believe
everyone.
everything
We're
that we
about
can
to
do?
start our live hangout for the Grouper Moon project, and we're just waiting for a few of the classrooms to join us. So we'll be getting started in just a couple of moments.
Could be if there were public people watching it stream.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
What do you got over there, Daddy?
It's a lot more fish than last year.
From February, I assume she's using February. It's not January.
Can she now do like
She's running
a longer one?
She's running.
And those are last year's numbers of February?
Last year numbers were 3.7.
Yeah, from February.
Yeah, okay, Christy.
Yes.
All right, we've got Seattle who's joining us.
It's a million.
Hi, Michaela. Hi, Center School. Welcome. Hi there. We're just waiting for a few more schools to sign on, so we'll get going in a minute or two.
Okay, there aren't very many students here, so because it was an add-on, it wasn't part of what we had planned. So just so you know, there's only like 3 or 4 people here.
That's fine.
It's all good. They're interested. They're curious. They're awake. Oh, there's Kelsey.
Is it raining?
Not currently,
Okay.
but it did and it will again. So yeah, it's a sucker hole right now. Is what it is. Is it raining there? Christy.
Hi, Mama. How's it
How are
going?
It's going. You know, so they started destroying our kitchen yesterday. It's awesome. I wish I were there with you. That's all I can say. Yeah. So, hey, it looks like you guys have been doing good work.
It's been good. It's been really busy.
I bet.
It's okay. I'm smushing here. It's too hot to do that.
You move back.
So, okay, I'm gonna mute us because I have to still set up my classroom. So,
Cool.
guys in a minute.
You need to have some interference on. And we told them that for quietness.
The live feed now, so we need you guys to be quiet. We're going to do our Skype stuff after that. Okay, no, those don't need to be right here. Hold it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just waiting for
Some other folks to join.
You know that you guys want to take a big buck place to be careful. This was happening places in midday dive. So we're gonna get people like this like one day to we'll figure out that it's if it's high dose.
He didn't know that we were going to use it?
No. He thought I was feeding it to use because he said that this was happening in lieu of if you need the midday dive.
Is he okay with leaving on the midday dive?
Yeah, you guys go chat. I'll call you over when I want to.
So you just have to kind of
There you are. Hi, Miss Bryce. And I see Kevin from Spot Bays joining us. Hello. We're just waiting a few more minutes for a couple of other schools to join us. Okay, Christy and Bryce. All right, so we have 3 classrooms joining us right now. There's 3 more that should be joining us, and we are just going to get started. And as they come, we will welcome them to the web chat. Welcome, everybody. I'm Todd Bohannon. I'm a REEF educator. To my left is Bryce Simmons, and to my right is Christy Pattengill Simmons, and they are the 2 primary scientists on this project. Let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to do today. We're going to talk a lot about the scientific tools that are being used to study the grouper. We're going to have a few scientists come and share some of those tools with you. We're going to share some of the findings that have come out of today this grouper mean project. And after that, we're going to share some amazing clips of video of the groupers spawning, which has been happening over the last 3 nights. And we have a really cool video of a shark that was in the spawning aggregation last night. And then when we're done with that, we will have questions. So as we're talking, go ahead and write down your questions and save those for the end, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end of the chat. Okay, so right now I'm going to turn it over to Bryce. I'm going to switch seats with Bryce. And Bryce is going to start with a little status update of the project as it has been going so far.
Okay, hi everybody. Welcome. So yeah, as Todd mentioned, we've been we spent a lot of time underwater over the last week or so. And the last 3 nights, we've seen the large group of Nassau grouper that are out there on the west end of Little Cayman, which is just out that way. They've been spawning. So what that means is there are thousands and thousands of fish out there, and at night they're reproducing, they're letting go of their eggs, and those eggs form this massive cloud that's so big and so dense that you can't see from one end to the other, and when you're in the middle of that cloud, the visibility is zero. It's like you're swimming literally in a cloud that you'd see in the sky, and that's all eggs, so all gametes, and so really impressive number of new baby grouper being released out there into the world.
Can you talk, yesterday I told them a little bit about how we've had to spend a few days looking for the grouper. Can you tell them a little bit about what's happened this year that's different?
Sure, yeah, so one of the challenges this year has been finding the grouper. You would think you know, thousands and thousands of fish would be easy to spot, but this year was a challenge, and the reason why is because for over a decade, those fish have gone back to the exact same spot. In fact, to a single mooring pin. So we have a rope out there with a float attached, and the boat pulls up and anchors onto that float, and we jump off the back of that boat, and there's all the fish right off the back of the boat. Well, this year, those fish weren't there. And so we were thinking, gosh, maybe we got the wrong month, or who knows what's happened. So we started exploring up and down the reefs, and lo and behold, all of those thousands of fish had moved half a kilometer, about a third of the mile up to the north. And that's the first time that's happened, so it really threw us for a loop, and it just goes to show that fish are just like you and I. They behave in ways that probably makes complete sense to the fish, but we have no idea why they decided to move. But nonetheless, we were able to find them, and since then, we've been able to collect all the data that we need to collect in order to keep monitoring the population.
All right. Could you tell us a little bit about the counting? How many counts that have happened, and what an estimate is of the number of fish we have so far?
Sure. Yeah. So for those of you who were with us on the live dive out at the aggregation site, you got to see a fish with a tag in it, and we have. Yeah. Well, let me show you that floy tag. Here it is. So this, you saw an orange tag. You guys see that? And little dongly bit at the end, and this thing, if you get up real close, you can't really read the numbers, but each one of these tags has a unique number on it. And we poked this into the back of the fish, so it's hanging out the back of the fish, and we did that to around 100 fish. So a very small percent of it. But we do that because we know exactly how many tags we put out, and then once we get into the water afterwards, we go down and we use our divers to count 50 fish. And each of those 50 fish, they keep track of how many of them have tags. So that gives us an estimate of the proportion of all fish in the population that are tagged. Because we know how many tags are in the population, we can use those two pieces of information in order to estimate how big the population is in general. And we've just done that calculation literally right before we got online with you guys here today. And the current estimate is about 4,900 fish out of that aggregation site. So that's roughly 1,000 fish more than last year, which is super good news because it really shows that the population is continuing to recover. So we're seeing a pretty substantial increase in the number of fish that's out there. Now, it's important to note that that is by far and away the largest known aggregation left of the species anywhere in the Caribbean. And it's right out here on the west end of Little Cayman. So the Caymans have a very unique resource here. They have what could say the largest last great aggregation of this species left anywhere in the Caribbean. A real treat to be able to help study it and work with the Cayman Islands Department of the Environment to document its recovery.
All right. Christy, do you think that you could you...
I was just going to follow up to say that listening to what Bryce is saying about the different ways that we tag and we do different parts of the research, it hopefully seems to you that teamwork is really an important part of this project. REEF and the Department of Environment and our different academic scientists from universities all come together and play a really important part in this project. We all have to work as a team. We've got divers in the water. Before every dive, we'd spend a lot of time talking about who's going to be doing what equipment needs to come, who's tagging, who's counting those tags, who's taking video. And so a lot goes into planning all of this work that you're hearing us talk about now.
So maybe, Christy, could you explain how the typical day goes on the Grouper Moon project for you researchers?
Yeah, it is a busy time. We have a lot going on. There's a team of about 15 people, scientists, and Todd as the educator, moving around and having different parts of the day happen. We've got typically 3 dives a day that we're doing, generally at 8 a.m. and then at about 1 p.m. and about 5 p.m. And in between those dives, we are going out. We're out there for about 2 hours from the time we leave the dock. We put tanks on the boat. We get our research done, come back, and then
It's a busy
again.
time. We have a lot going on. There's a team of 15 and Todd as the educator.
We'll get it.
Denise, can you mute your computer? They're all muted. It's Denise. There. Thanks, Denise. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about the timeline of the Grouper Moon project? Where are we right now in from beginning to end of this yearly project?
Right. So we're coming to the tail end of when the Nassau grouper will be spawning. So they spawned, as Todd said, 3 nights in a row. It's entirely possible they'll spawn again tonight, although based on our first dive of the day today, we were just out there a little while ago, and there's many less fish than there were yesterday, maybe only in the order of 800 fish. So it sure seems like a lot of the grouper that have already spawned, they've released their eggs, and now they're headed back to their home reefs. They're going back home. But there's still a few out there, so it's entirely possible those few remaining fish that are there will spawn again. I would guess after that, the remainder of those will go home tomorrow, and they'll be done for the year. And what's really interesting about Nassau grouper, this is the only time of the year when they reproduce. So after these few days, they won't do any spawning at all up until next winter. And so this period of time, over those 4 or 5 days, represents the entire reproduction for the population for an entire year. And so it's a really critical period of time.
Wonderful. Bryce, do you think that you could, on the blog, I've shown a lot of lasers and people measuring, and I was hoping you could show the kids how that works.
Sure. Yeah, so this is our laser setup, and I think you might have seen Leslie using this, or we have another one as well down on the dive when we were out with you. This has got, see these, if I put it in close, each of these little circles here, those are lasers. So if I turn them on, let's see, I turn it on here, and you can see I'll shoot the laser at the camera here and see if you can see.
Don't do that.
Yeah, I can't do it. All right, you can see the red dots, right? So those are perfectly parallel, which means these 2 outer dots are 20 centimeters apart. And it doesn't matter how far away I am from an object that I'm hitting those lasers with, the 2 dots that the lasers create are always exactly 20 centimeters apart. So if I put this on a fish and I've got my GoPro camera going, on the video that I take with my GoPro, I got a video of the fish and dots on the fish. And I can later take that back to my computer and grab the picture that has the fish and the dots and use that to estimate the size of the fish. Because I know the distance between the 2 dots, I can estimate the total length of that fish. We do that for hundreds and hundreds of fish, and by doing that, we get an estimate of the size of all of the different fish that are in our population. That's important because in addition to just numbers of fish, we can document recovery or change in the population through time by looking at the change in the sizes of fish. Some fish that are teenagers are going to be much smaller than those fish that are older. So as a result, if we see lots and lots of new, small, young fish showing up in the population,
we couldn't find the fish earlier in the week. They were here the first day we got here at the normal study site where we've been going for years. And then the next day, no fish. There were very few fish. We knew they went somewhere. We thought they were still somewhere nearby. And one of the scientists, in a very scientific way, said, well, maybe they're up the reef a ways. So let's go look there. Well, up the reef a ways is a hard place to get to sometimes because, as Bryce probably mentioned, currents can be pretty strong out there. This is a rough part of the ocean, a mile or so offshore from Little Cayman, or it can be really rough, and it can be high current speed. So to get a half mile or a third of a mile, which is where we thought the fish might be, you had to have a little help. You couldn't swim just, well, you could swim to it, but you might have a hard time getting back. So we use underwater scooters to get where we bringing us back.
All right, there we are. We are back.
We are back. So, I was talking about these scooters. They're very small and pretty lightweight. Probably only weighs 10 pounds or so. But this thing straps on your tank behind you and shoots water backwards behind you whenever you press this little trigger. So I was going to show you, Bryce, maybe you could grab that tank real quick and we could show them how it attaches. But this part of the scooter is a battery. It's called a Pegasus thruster. And this is a battery here. And this thruster itself is back here. This battery detaches whenever you need it to. If you need to go charge it, you can pull it right off and go charge the battery. And you have to charge them every time you come back inshore. But as soon as they're charged up, you put it back on and snap it into place. And then on your tank, you see, normally you have a big vest attached to your tank, but you also have this little bracket right here. And these scooters attach to the back of this bracket with a couple little hooks, one at the bottom and one at the top. And it clicks into place, and then you have a little safety pin here that you need to attach. Otherwise, it could come off right in the middle of your dive. Don't want that. So you put it on like that, and then you have a trigger that goes around the front of you, and all you have to do is press this little trigger, and you see the scooter turns on. And that thing moves you through the water very fast compared to swimming. Normally, you could swim maybe at your best, maybe a half mile an hour, and these scooters will take you, oh, maybe a couple miles an hour. And the currents usually are less than that, so you can swim faster than the currents are pushing against you if you have a scooter running, usually. But there are times when you can swim as hard as you want, and you'll be going backwards because the water's moving so fast. So these scooters allowed us to get up to the reef far enough to where we found again the Nassau grouper aggregation. And as Bryce said, it was a third of a mile or more up the reef from its normal position. But why the fish do that, who knows? But it's a big reef, and finding these fish can be a big challenge. But we were able to, and because of that, we found them the day before, or the afternoon before they spawned for the first time. So we were lucky to have those scooters and lucky to be able to get up that far on the reef to find the fish.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed that. We have another scientist here who's going to talk about some drifters that they've been putting out to, well, I'm going to let him, Devin, is going to explain to you what they're used for.
Hi, guys. I'm Devin. This is a drifter, the Autonomous Underwater Explorer.
So let's hold this up close so they can get a nice, good look at it. What's this writing here?
That's in case it gets lost.
Oh.
They don't get recovered if we can't get them out of the water in time. The theory is that they'll drift like a message in a bottle, and someone in another country will pick it up and give us a call.
So is this like a little computer or like a robot or something that goes under there?
Yeah, it's a little robot. So we program it, and it goes down, it sinks into the water, and it records the sound and temperature, all sorts of data, and it comes back up. It sends us its location. We find it. And
how does it send you the location?
It uses GPS satellites. So it gets a fix in the antenna here.
So this is so it goes in like this?
Yeah, it's sitting like this.
Okay.
It's floating, bobbing down the surface, and it gets a fix with the GPS, then sends us another signal by satellite. If the waves are too rough and it's oscillating like this, we can't get a good fix, and that's
So how
usually how we fear we'll lose them.
how are you guys going out and finding these after you've dropped them? It sends you a signal, and then do you have? Is there a map that you're using, or how do you find it?
Yeah, once it sends us a signal, we look at the GPS coordinates on a map. We usually have a website called GeoCourse, and then we go out there in a boat, assuming it hasn't gone too far. Usually they go maybe 5 to 10 miles, so it's pretty easy to go get them.
And how many of these have you deployed on this trip?
On this trip, we've deployed 5. 3 went out drifting. Others, we just wanted to use their hydrophone to record sound, so we just weighted them down and strapped them in the array that they talked about earlier with GoPros and other recorders.
So one of the main things these are doing is recording sound. Can you explain how recording sound is helping us to understand the grouper?
Yeah, so as I've been told you guys know, the grouper larvae live in a swarm, and they float and drift with the currents, and they listen for the sounds of a reef, for the soundscape. So the idea is we can set these drifting with the larvae. They'll drift to the same rate, and they'll hear the same sounds that attract the larvae to the reef, and that way we can study what those sounds are and see what attracts the larvae to reefs.
So you're really just putting them out there when they're spawning
Yeah.
to listen to the larvae at that time?
Yeah.
Really cool. So there are the drifters. And there's actually a website that you guys can look at on the REEF website that says, it's called Baby Grouper Adrift. And you can see some more information about this drifter project. Thank you, Devin. All right. Okay, so you got to see some of the really cool. Oh, we have one more that I'm going to let Christy explain. It's really cool.
Yeah, this is one more really great piece of equipment that Devin and his group brought down. Those are researchers from the University of California, San Diego, and the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. They are doing the study that Devin just told you about, but they're also doing some video work out on the aggregation to look at coupling video with sound. So this time it's the sound that the grouper themselves, the adult grouper, are making as they move around and behave on the reef. And this really cool instrument was printed with a 3D printer. They designed exactly how they wanted it to be to hold this array of GoPros into a 360-degree view of the aggregation site. So this has been sitting on a tripod out on the reef in the middle of a ring of more GoPros all the way around in a big hexagon, very large area of the reef. And each of those hexagon points has a little sound recorder on it. And so then we can put it down during the day and then collect the GoPros each night, charge them, and then put them back. And at the end, we'll end up with a whole bunch of video coupled with sound recordings to be able to better understand the behavior of the grouper as they interact with each other during the day on the aggregation site.
I have a quick question or clarification. Is some of the sounds I told the students that they're listening for are the sounds that the grouper actually make, not just the sounds that the larvae are listening for. Can you talk just a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So like Christy was saying, this gets put down, and video is really important to us because when we're not diving, we can't be there all of the time. It's a challenging environment to exist in, but if we put cameras down, then we get images of the reef for many hours at a time, and so we can capture all of the behaviors and fish when we're not there. What we're really interested in with this is to get a 360 view so you can get that data back onto your computer and you can watch that video, and you can, using your mouse, you can look anywhere you want with the video. And so when we have that coupled with our hydrophones that are listening for when grouper make noises, we can actually use it to scroll around to look at exactly where a noise is coming from and see which fishes are making those noises. And that's important because we know that a lot of grouper and a lot of fish make noises when they come to spawn, but some of the fish we don't know what their noises are yet. And if we can figure that out, then we don't necessarily need video to monitor. We can just use hydrophones or little microphones underwater to listen, to hear if they're making those sounds. And if we hear them making those sounds, we know that they're there to spawn. So this work is largely trying to identify which sounds go with which fish, and we can use that later on to help us increase our number of tools that we can use to monitor the aggregations.
It looks like you have another really scientific tool here.
So this is a really great lesson that all field biologists really need to, people who do research and science out in the field sometimes have to improvise. And this was an improvisation that our colleagues as part of the Inspire group did earlier this week, because they wanted to have a different way in addition to the array. And so as you can maybe figure it out, this is similar to what I was showing you here, but this is a Frisbee, and with a whole bunch of GoPros all attached to it as a different way to be able to get a 360-degree view over there out on the reef. So sometimes, you know, when you're in a place where you can't go down to the hardware store and buy exactly what you want, you look around and you figure out what it is that you can use. And in this instance, it was a Frisbee.
Awesome. All right, well, I'm going to scoot you over for a second. And you guys have now been hearing a lot about the grouper spawning, and I bet you're chomping at the bit to see what that actually looks like. And we have some footage that I'm going to screen share with you of the spawning that happened just last night, and it's really, really incredible. So hold on one second while I share my screen with you. Okay. Okay, so Bryce, can you tell us a little bit about what we just saw there?
Sure, yeah, so that is video that was taken, as Todd said, last night. Nighttime is when these fish actually release their eggs. So during the day, you see lots of fish milling about and kind of hanging around and nudging each other and following each other. But it's really right at the point of dusk, right at the point when the sun's setting, that these fish start to release their eggs. And you were seeing them right at around dusk there, starting to release their eggs and their gametes. And when they do that, a female is shooting up and releasing their eggs, and all the males gather around to try and fertilize those eggs. And once they're released, that's it. Those eggs then drift along with the current. But you saw that puff. Hopefully, you were able to see that big puff of white, and that's the eggs, and that's the fertilization of the eggs that you're seeing there. So when it really gets going, there are hundreds of those spawning bursts that happen all over the place. It's like fireworks, only, you know, just all white fireworks. And then by the end of the evening, when it's time for us to come up, so much spawning has happened that it's like you're diving in milk. It's that green.
All right,
white.
so there's another really incredible piece of footage showing the spawning that I'm going to share with you right now. So bear with me one moment. No. This is And then get into with the eggs. They can't leave out the foot. Okay, I want to play it again. All right. So, can you tell us what we just saw there?
Yeah, so that was pretty incredible. That's a video that actually Steve Giddings, who was showing you the thruster, he shot that last night. That is just one long streaming burst of fish releasing eggs and sperm all the way up from probably 90 feet of depth to about 30 feet of depth. And Steve just happened to be up top when the fish came up. And you can see that they're not so interested in the divers there, though, so they'll just keep going if the diver's near you. The other thing to point out there is at the very end you saw Leslie come up, one of our other research divers, with a plastic bag. And we're as part of this research, we're actually collecting some of the eggs from the spawn. And so she collected some of those eggs from that spawning event. We are then taking those eggs back to the lab here on Little Cayman Island to CCMI, the Central Caribbean Marine Research Institute. And we're raising those little eggs up, and we're turning them into baby grouper. We're letting them hatch into baby grouper. And that happens in about 24 hours. Those eggs go from just little balls into a fully formed fish just within 24 hours. So it's pretty neat, pretty cool.
That is really neat. And there's one more piece of footage that I thought you guys would really enjoy. I'm not going to tell you anything about it. I'm going to share it with you. So hold on one second. We can't see. Great. Were you guys able to see that? Wave at the camera if you're able to see that. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So what was going on in that short clip, right?
I believe that was a shark.
It was.
Did you guys see that shark?
Yeah.
So
what kind of a shark do you think it was?
that was probably a Caribbean reef shark. So we see sharks out there quite a bit, and when you get that many big, tasty fish in a small little area, it's not just people that like to eat Nassau grouper. Sharks like to eat them too, and so we'll see sharks out there a lot. And in fact, we'll see them actively trying to grab Nassau grouper as they spawn. So it makes for some really exciting times down there. It's really it's a treat to be able to see sharks out there.
Wonderful. All right, so we are now at the point in our talk where we're going to have time for some questions. So teachers, if you can ask your students for some questions and then send me a little message in the chat, in the group chat box that you are ready, then I'll indicate to you, you can turn off your microphone and we can take your question. So we might have a question from Troy's class, or perhaps Kevin Stewart's class at Spot Bay on the Brack, or perhaps Michaela's class at the Center School. I see that Denise asked a question. Are you seeing any changes with the currents and drifters as compared to previous years that would be a possible reason for why the fish have moved north?
Yeah, that's a great question, Denise. As Steve mentioned, there's a lot of current out there sometimes. Other times there's not much. So sometimes we can have a beautiful dive out there, and other times it can be really, really rough. In years past, we've had lots of current and pretty rough weather. This year we've had very little current compared to previous years. That's entirely possible. That that's an explanation for why they move. It's as good as explanation as I can come up with. I really have no idea why they moved.
So it's still kind of a mystery.
It's a total mystery, and that's the great thing about this type of a project and about marine science in general is there's always new things to figure out. So just when we think we've got it totally figured out, everything changes, and we have to figure out why. So that's part of the fun.
All right, and we have a question from Cayman Prep in Miss Bryce's class. Go right ahead and speak into the microphone.
How do the eggs do they float in the water?
Right. So the question is, do the eggs float in the water? Yeah, great question. They do float. They are about what's called neutrally buoyant, and what that means is they don't sink and they don't really float. They float a little bit. So if you were to release that egg over the course of 24 to 48 hours, it would very slowly work its way up to the surface, but it's not going to shoot right to the surface, like if you were to release a balloon underwater. So it does float, but it's very much neutrally buoyant, which means it's just going to hang in the water right where it gets released. Yeah, it's a great question, but they don't all sink to the bottom of the ocean. Eventually, they'll stay up in the surface waters.
If you look behind us, we have made the reef in Little Cayman with all the grouper. Can you see that?
Yeah, we can see it.
Those are some great Nassau grouper drawings too. Did you guys do all those?
Site. We made those.
Wow, that's awesome. Great drawings, you guys. Those are really good. I need a picture of that, please.
Okay.
Nice work. Nice work, Miss Bryce's class. All right, we're going to go over to Troy's class here at East End. And their question is, why do they... Oh, we've got two questions. Let's start with the first one. Why do you use the GoPro cam? And that's Kylie's question.
Okay, great question. So we actually use not just one GoPro cam. We have something like 20 to 30 of the GoPros that we're using on all of our different equipment. And we use that for two reasons. One, because it allows us to document what we're seeing, so we can go back after the fact and we can look on our video that we shot and confirm all of our observations. And the other reason why is because, as I said, it's a challenge for us to be in the water all the time, but if we put cameras down on the reef, we can capture a lot more information, a lot more pictures about what's going on while we're not there. And oftentimes that provides us with some really interesting observations, things like turtles and sharks and strange behaviors from grouper that we otherwise wouldn't see.
Good question. Okay, and it looks like Kevin Stewart's class out at Spot Bay. How are you doing? They've got a question if you want to unmute your mic and go ahead and talk right into the camera.
My question is, why don't the Nassau grouper just spawn on the reef where they live? And my second question is, why do they spawn in groups?
Ah, okay. Excellent question. All right, Bryce. So, we're not 100% sure as to why they don't spawn on their home reefs, but we have some pretty good theories. So the principal reason we think, the main reason why they all leave their home reefs and go to one main site is because it's much easier to find mates. So they're normally territorial. So instead of being interested in having a male or a female come into their territory, they fight them off. And they do that because they can keep all of those resources, all their food, for themselves, right? So they don't want to share normally. But during spawning time, they want to allow all the other grouper to get close to them so they can find a mate. And so during this time of year, all of the grouper go out to that single site, and there they all mix. And by mixing, they have lots of opportunities to find a mate. Now, what's interesting is they also take on different colors, right? So we saw on Mrs. Bryce's wall, all of those fish that those guys painted, which were beautifully done, they have the normal coloration for Nassau grouper. But out at the aggregation site, they have a completely different color than that. And we think part of the reason why they take on that different coloration is to indicate to other grouper that, hey, look, I'm not interested in fighting right now. I'm interested in finding a mate. So
it's a way of allowing all of those fish that are normally territorial to get close together and find mates. Your other question was...
Let's go back to Spot Bay. Can you let us know the second part of your question? You can unmute your microphone when you can.
My second question was, why do they spawn in groups?
Why do they spawn in groups?
Why do they spawn? Okay, good question. So when a female releases her eggs, the male has to release their sperm at the same time. And so when all of those fish are together and they're all releasing their gametes together, that makes the fertilization more efficient. In other words, it's a better way to release eggs that will ultimately turn into baby grouper. If you only have a few fish releasing gametes, sperm and eggs at the same time, then maybe only some eggs would get fertilized. But when you get a bunch of fish all releasing at the same time, it's much more efficient at making sure that those eggs are prepared to turn into baby grouper.
Excellent. Excellent question, Spot Bay. It looks like East End has another question. Why do they only spawn in the nights? And that's Richard's question. Good question, Richard. Right, so we think that they only spawn at dusk, right at dusk, because they're maximizing both being able to see each other with, after they release their eggs, those eggs being drifting out there in the dark so that predators or animals that eat eggs can't see them. So if you release your eggs right at dusk, you have just enough light to see the other grouper so you can get together to fertilize the eggs. But shortly after you release those eggs, it turns to night, and all those egg predators that would otherwise get a long time and lots of light to eat those eggs can't see the eggs anymore. So that's why we think they spawn right at that period of dusk, right when it's turning dark. Wonderful question, East End. Okay, and it looks like Seattle at the center school, your question was wanting to know how the spawning behaviors, or the bursts, is an advantage for the grouper. I think you actually just explained that.
Yeah, I think so. It's just a matter of getting as many fish together at the same time as possible, and that makes the eggs most viable. They're most likely to turn into baby grouper.
All right, and we're going to go back to Spot Bay, who has another question. If you guys are ready, you can unmute your microphone and come up and ask your question.
I was just asking, are these the only fish spawning at this time?
Are these the only fish spawning at this time? Excellent question. All right, Bryce.
No, they're not. In fact, there are many different species of fish that are spawning this time of year at that site. And in fact, if you go to that site on different times of the year, you'll see different species. So that site is important year-round for different species of fish that live on the reefs here in the Caymans. It's an important place for them to reproduce, to spawn. This time of year, in addition to Nassau grouper being out there, we see tiger grouper, another species of grouper, that are out there spawning at the same time. And just 2 days ago, for the first time, we discovered a large aggregation of yellowfin grouper. Sometimes they're called rockfish or rock grouper down here. And we saw a big aggregation of those, certainly in the thousands. And that's the first time we've ever seen that. And you know why? It's because when the Nassau grouper moved to their new spot, they moved apparently right next to the aggregation of yellowfin grouper. And so 2 species of grouper aggregating right next to each other and releasing eggs at the same night. It's a pretty amazing sight.
Wow, excellent. And back at the center school in Seattle, the students would like to know, what is the greatest danger to a diver when you're, I would assume, out there working on this project?
Right. You might think, so you saw the shark video, you might think that the greatest danger to us as divers out there is maybe a large predator, like a shark, or a moray eel, or a barracuda. And in fact, that's not the danger at all. The sharks are very hard to get close to. We see them off in the distance, but they don't want to be anywhere near us. And if we try and get close to them, they swim away. So it's hard to get videos of them. What's really dangerous for us out there is the depth that we're diving at. So we just need to be very, very safe with our diving practices. If we stay down there too long, we have options for maybe running out of air or getting what's called decompression sickness, which is sickness induced by the pressure of the water because we're so deep. So we have to be very safe as divers, and we can only spend so much time in the water. Otherwise, we run into possibilities of getting hurt or sick due to our diving activities. That's the biggest danger.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, and we're going to go back now to Spot Bay, who has another question. Go right on ahead.
Does it have to be calm for the groupers to lay their eggs? Like, does the sea have to be calm?
Good question. So the question was, does the sea have to be calm for the grouper to lay eggs? All right.
That would be great. If they only laid eggs when it was calm and the seas were perfect, and it was easy for us to jump in the water and document what they're doing as scientists. But unfortunately, that's not the case. They can spawn in very rough weather. They do spawn in very rough weather. They spawn in heavy currents. They're fish. They're really good at swimming in rough seas. To them, it's nothing. To us as divers, it's a very, very significant challenge. So it does not appear that currents or weather has any effect. They're still going to spawn just the same.
Excellent. All right, you guys. That was a really great chat. Thank you all so much for showing up today. Tomorrow we will have our final hangout where we are going to be diving on a reef here closer to shore, and we're going to take a look at what a really healthy coral reef in the Caribbean looks like. All right, so thanks so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you guys.
Bye-bye.